We are, this is Chronicle 2-7, meaning that we are in Chamber of Secrets, which is book 2, and we are doing chapter 7, title of which, Erica?
Mudbloods and Murmurs.
Mudbloods and Murmurs. Dun, dun, dun. And however, we are calling this episode Better In Than Out. And you'll understand why. Oh, better. Yeah, that completely changes the context, doesn't it? Better out than in. Sorry. Oh, your face was great. Okay. We're calling this episode Better Out Than In.
That's the ticket.
And once we go through the chapter summary, you'll fully understand why. All right. So
we got some new characters.
We do. Erica, tell us who the new characters are. Why do I always forget new characters and just get ready to jump right into the chapter?
Because you're excited and you just want to get into the chapter.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
They are mentions as of now, right? So we have Gladys Gudgeon and Veronica Sneffley, and they are, as we will find out later in the chapter, just mentioned by Gilderoy Lockhart
as some of his biggest fans.
He is some of his biggest fans. And then our third character, as of now, is just a voice. That's all. That's all we're going to say right now.
Dun, dun, dun. Things are getting creepy.
Oh, yeah.
So, at the end of the last chapter, they had captured the classroom full of Cornish pixies, and Ron and Harry were less than thrilled with Mr. Charming, Gilderoy Lockhart, and Hermione was still defending him with his, oh, it's just hands-on magic, guys. Do you know all the wonderful things he's done? So this chapter starts letting us know that over the next few days, Harry did everything he could to dodge, dive, and completely avoid running into Mr. Gilderoy Lockhart. He don't want nothing to do with that man.
However, he has a new shadow as well.
And so it's a little harder to avoid little Mr. Colin Creevey because he is a Gryffindor, so he's in the dorm, he's in the common room. He's, when you're at the table, you're broken up by house, he's at the Gryffindor table. Little Mr. Colin Creevey is very smitten with Mr. Harry Potter. And it says that nothing seemed to give Colin a bigger thrill than to say, "You all right, Harry?" 6 or 7 times a day and hear, "Hello, Colin," back. Even if Harry was exasperated when he said it. So, Harry's now in his second year, and in addition to having Mr. 5-time Witch Weekly's Charming Smile winner telling him he's nobody, he also has a first year following him around with a camera, constantly trying to get his attention and very much his biggest fan.
And also trying to constantly get his autograph.
Oh, yes. Yes. Wanting Harry to sign a doggone picture.
And Harry, you can only see his elbow.
Right.
Because Gilderoy was trying to pull him into the picture, and Harry was reluctant. So all you can really see is his elbow.
Harry stands on business. Harry is not signing a photo.
Yeah.
And Colin keeps asking, and Harry will not sign a photo. It doesn't matter which photo it is, whether it's that photo of his elbow or some other photo that Colin's gotten randomly while they're moving about the school or whatever else. Harry is not signing photos. He's just not. He won't do it.
Just so that you guys know, Colin has a Muggle camera with film in it, right? A Muggle camera. But apparently, it seems, according to what we understand from the development of the film from the last chapter, you just develop it in a special solution. So, like, everybody uses Muggle cameras, and you just develop it in this particular solution so that then it has movement.
That's what I understood it to mean. It's in the development that makes the pictures move.
Okay. But then how
Some
come they talk and stuff too then?
I don't know. Because those are also different photos than the usual photos. You know what I mean? Like,
or those are paintings.
Maybe. That's what I was going to say. Because they're portraits and they're paintings on the wall. And those ones talk and you can interact with them and all that. But like when Hagrid gave Harry the photo album, his parents don't talk to him. The photos move, but his parents don't talk to him or anything like that. So
okay, so there's a difference between portraits, actual paintings, and
pictures.
The pictures. Interesting.
That's what I'm guessing.
Okay.
Anyway, so as we're getting caught up, so Harry's avoiding Gilderoy Lockhart, can't avoid Colin Creevey, but exasperatedly dealing with him multiple times a day. Hedwig's still mad at Harry from the car incident when they landed at Hogwarts and crashed into the tree. Ron's wand is still malfunctioning because it's broken and taped together with Spello tape. And sadly, Friday morning, it shot out of Ron's hand in Charms class and hit poor Professor Flitwick squarely between the eyes, creating a throbbing green boil. So Ron's doing great. Harry's having the time of his life.
They're off to a great start.
Yeah, we're swinging into the new school year, just doing great. So Saturday morning, they get ready to go. They're planning to go see Hagrid, but suddenly at the crack of dawn, Harry's getting woken up kind of aggressively. And he's like, what's the matter? And he opens his eyes, and it is Wood.
Mm-hmm.
Wood's the captain of the Quidditch team. And he's like, come on, it's time for Quidditch practice. Literally the crack of dawn. It's still dark outside. So he tells Oliver, he's like, it's the crack of dawn. And Wood's like, yeah, exactly. I've got a new training program. We're going to get a jump on it. We're going to win this year. Oliver Wood is a little gung-ho when it comes to his Quidditch team.
Well, and he's super jaded about the fact that they lost the year before because Harry was in the hospital.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
My favorite thing that it said is that Gryffindor team suffered their worst defeat in 300 years. I thought that was hilarious.
So Oliver is determined, as he says, to be the first off the mark this year. So he's ready. It's the crack of dawn. Come on, Harry, get up, get dressed. And Harry's like, yeah, all right. I'll meet you down there. And Oliver's like, yeah, good man. Let's go. Meet you on the field in 15 minutes. So he gets his robes on and he leaves a note for them, throws his broomstick over his shoulder and heads out to the pitch. And before he can even clear the portrait hole door, all he hears is Colin Creevey coming running down the spiral staircase right behind him. Hey, I heard somebody saying your name. Look, I've developed a picture I want to show you. And Harry kind of looks at it, and this is where we get the description that the photograph is pretty much just Harry's elbow because Harry's fighting Gilderoy Lockhart the whole time to not be in the picture. And Colin, of course, once again asks Harry to sign it, and Harry's like, yeah, no. He's like, yeah, sorry, I'm in a hurry. I got to get to Quidditch practice. And as he climbs to the hole, Colin's like, oh, wow. All right. Wait for me. I've never been to a Quidditch game before. So he does not get rid of Colin, who follows him down to the field. And as they're walking, Colin's asking questions. And so Harry, because, you know, still a first year, still a kid, still learning the magical stuff or whatever, he answers all of Colin's questions and kind of gives him in a nutshell of what the game is and which balls there are and how the game works and all this other stuff, so that Colin can kind of understand how the game goes. And so they chit chat about that as they get down to the pitch. And then when they get down there, Harry's finally like, oh, well, gotta go, and slips into the changing rooms and finally gets rid of Colin. But Colin says, oh, no, find a good seat, and goes off to the stands. So he's not fully rid of him, but he doesn't have to really talk to him anymore. The rest of the team is already inside. They're barely awake, and Fred and George have puffy eyes and their hair's still tousled, and they're sitting there with Alicia, who's nodding off against the wall behind her, and Katie and Angelina are yawning. And Oliver's like, oh, all right, there you are, Harry. What kept you? And I wanted to have a quick talk with you guys, and I think I've developed this playbook over the summer that's going to be really great for all of us. And he launches into this dialogue, and he's got a board, and everybody's like, But it's not just one board. After he explains the first board with all the X's and arrows and all of that stuff, he's got 2 more boards behind that. So by the time he gets through all of the stuff that he wants to do, basically the team is sitting there asleep because it's the crack of dawn. And Oliver chose to start practice with a very long monologue and boards of X's and O's. So then he's like, all right, any questions? And Fred's like, couldn't you have told us this yesterday when we were awake?
Yeah.
Which does not amuse Wood, but he tells them, look, we should have won the Quidditch Cup last year. We're easily the best team, but unfortunately, due to circumstances beyond our control, of course, beyond their control being that Harry was in the hospital and could perform at the time. So this year we're going to train harder than ever before. Let's go. Let's get these theories I've just talked to you about into practice. And so they're still yawning, but they get up and they start to head out onto the field. And the sun's completely up now. And there's a few more people in the stands, and Ron and Hermione are there, and they're like, dang, aren't you finished yet? And Harry's like, dude, we haven't even started yet. And they have toast and jam in their hands, and Harry's jealous because he's been up since the crack of dawn sitting in there and hasn't eaten anything yet. And so he gets on his broomstick, and Harry always loves when he gets on his broomstick. Like, he can feel like total crap, but the moment he kicks off on his broom, he's like, it's like natural to him. It's his favorite place to be. Mm-hmm. So he gets on his broom, and everybody's on the pitch, and they're like, great, look at us, we're outside, whatever. And Fred's like, hey, what's that weird clicking noise?
It's Harry's shadow.
Of course, Harry looks over to the stands, and it's Colin in one of the highest seats, just going nuts with his camera, clicking away, clicking away. And he's like, hey, look over here, this way. And Fred's like, who's that? And Harry's like, I have no idea. And he speeds off down the pitch so that he's as far away from Colin as possible. And then Wood, all of a sudden, because, you know, Wood's a little obsessed. So he's like, who's that? He could be a Slytherin spy. And that's when Harry's like, no, he's a Gryffindor. admits that he kind of knows who he is, because poor thing. And that's when George says, and Slytherin doesn't need a spy, Oliver. And Wood's like, what do you mean? And George is like, they're here in person. And he points. And so they look down, and the Slytherin team is coming onto the pitch.
Uh-oh.
And Wood is outraged. I can't believe this. And so he goes down. He's like, I booked the field for today. We'll see about this. So he shoots down toward the ground and lands a little harder than he meant to, because, you know, he's outraged.
Yeah.
He staggers a little bit, and Fred and George, not to be left out of any melee, of course, go down and follow him as well. And so Wood yells at the Slytherin captain, Flint, this is our practice time. We got here specially. You clear off now. And Flint kind of gives him a cunning smile, and he's like, there's plenty of room for all of us, Wood. And now the girls have come over, Angelina and Katie and Alicia, and they're like, what's going on? And Wood's like, I booked the field. I booked it. And Flint's like, yeah, but we've got a specially signed note here. And he pulls a note out of his pocket, and it says, I, Professor S. Snape, give the Slytherin team permission to practice today on the Quidditch field, owing to the need to train their new seeker. Bum, bum, bum. And Wood's like, huh? You got a new seeker? Where? And from behind these 6 super huge dudes comes this small, platinum blonde, pointy-chinned boy. Who else but our lovely Draco Malfoy?
I don't know about lovely.
And Fred immediately is like, aren't you Lucius Malfoy's son? And he says it with dislike. And Flint says, it's funny you should mention Draco's father. Let me show you the generous gift he's made to the Slytherin team. And all 7 of them kind of show their broomsticks, and they have 7 brand new, shiny Nimbus 2001s. Now remember, up until this point, Harry had the best broom out there, and it's a Nimbus 2000. So now the Slytherin team has 7 brand new Nimbus 2001s.
Right.
And Flint says, oh, it's the very latest model. It only came out last month. I believe it outstrips the old 2000 series by a considerable amount. And as for the old clean sweeps, where he smiles nastily at Fred and George, because Fred and George are both holding clean sweep 5s.
Yeah.
Sweeps the boards with them. So none of the Gryffindor team, they're all in shock. They can't think of anything to say, and Malfoy's just standing there smirking with his cold eyes. And Ron and Hermione come and start crossing the grass, and Flint says, oh, look, a field invasion. And Ron asks Harry, what's happening? Why aren't you playing? What's he doing here? Talking about Malfoy, of course. And Malfoy, because he just can't help it, I'm the new Slytherin seeker, Weasley, he says with a smirk. Or he says smugly. Everyone's just been admiring the brooms my father's bought our team. And of course, Ron, being up on Quidditch and broomsticks and all that, knows exactly what they are at first glance, gasps open mouth, and, you know, is admiring these 7 beautiful, superb broomsticks right in front of him. And Malfoy says, good, aren't they? But perhaps the Gryffindor team will be able to raise some gold and get new brooms too. You could raffle off those Queen Sweep 5s. I expect a museum would bid for them. And the Slytherins, of course, laugh. At which point Hermione jumps in and says, at least no one on the Gryffindor team had to buy their way in. They got in on pure talent. And this pisses Malfoy off, so the smug look kind of flickers, but then he says, no one asked for your opinion, you filthy little mudblood. Now, the book is from Harry's perspective, so the next line says, Harry knew at once that Malfoy had said something really bad, because there was an instant uproar at his words.
Mm-hmm.
Harry don't have no idea what's been said. He don't know nothing about it. But Flint had to dive in front of Malfoy because Fred and George tried to jump on him. Alicia shrieked, "How dare you!" And Ron plunged his hand into his robe and pulled out his wand, yelling, "You'll pay for this, Malfoy!" and pointed it furiously under Flint's arm at Malfoy's face. Now, remember, Ron's wand doesn't particularly work, and it's spello taped together. So, a loud bang goes off, and a jet of green light shoots out of the wrong end of Ron's wand. So instead of hitting Malfoy, it hits Ron, backfires on him instead, hits him in the stomach, and he goes reeling backwards onto the grass. And Hermione's squealing and goes running over. And Ron opens his mouth to speak, but he belches, and several large slugs come dribbling out of his mouth.
Yum.
So the Slytherin team, of course, is like just, they're dying of laughter at this point. They think it's the most hilarious thing ever. Flint was doubled over, hanging onto his broomstick. Malfoy's on all fours, banging his fist on the ground. But the Gryffindors kind of gather around Ron to make sure he's okay, but he keeps just belching up these large, glistening slugs. Slugs. Nobody wanted to touch him. And then all of a sudden, Harry's like, we better get him to Hagrid's. It's the closest place. He'll know what to do. And so Hermione nods bravely and helps Harry kind of pick him up. And then all of a sudden, because his timing is friggin' impeccable, here comes Colin Creevey. What happened, Harry? What happened? Is he ill? Can you cure him? Can't you? And so he's there, and Ron gives a huge heave, and more slugs dribble out of his mouth, at which point Colin's like, "Oh, can you hold him still, Harry?" and puts his camera up, and this pisses Harry off. "Get away, Colin!" And then he and Hermione start taking Ron out of the Quidditch pitch, and they take him down to Hagrid's hut. Yeah. And Hermione trying to be all comforting, and she's like, "We're nearly there, Ron. You'll be all right. It's okay." And so when they get to Hagrid's house, they're about 20 feet away when the door opens, but instead of Hagrid coming out, our new favorite charming winner of the 5-time Witch Weekly Charming Smile winner comes out the door. And Harry's like, "Oh, quick, behind here." And they duck, like, behind a bush, because Harry still don't want to be bothered with Mr. Lockhart. Not at all. Yeah. So they jump behind a bush, and Hermione's a little reluctant, but even still. And then they hear, as he's leaving the cabin, Mr. Lockhart telling Hagrid, very loudly, of course, "It's such a simple matter, and if you need help, you know where I am, and I'll let you have a copy of my book. Surprised you haven't already got one. I'll sign one for you tonight and send it over. Well, goodbye then." And he strides off toward the castle, and Harry waited until he was completely out of sight before allowing them to come out from behind the bush and pulling Ron out and going to Hagrid's door. So they knock on the door, and when Hagrid comes, he looks a little grumpy, but when he sees them, his expression changes. And he's like, "Oh, hey, I've been wondering when you guys were going to come and see me. Come in. I thought it might have been Professor Lockhart back again." So Harry and Hermione help Ron into the house, and they go inside, and Hagrid doesn't seem particularly perturbed by, I love this because of the way it's worded. It says, Hagrid didn't seem perturbed by Ron's slug problem. It's just so very oversimplified. It's
well, but he's an adult in the wizarding world. He is works at a school, right? So like I'm sure he's well used to it. Like he's seen crazier, far crazier things.
That's true. And he does he's the groundskeeper, so he's messing with magical creatures all day long when he goes into the forest and stuff like that. So I guess slugs are nothing to him.
No.
So he doesn't seem at all bothered by Ron's problem, which Harry is, explaining to him. And cheerfully he says, better out than in. Which is, of course, where we got the title for this chronicle. And so he gives Ron a big old bucket, and he's like, here, just get them all out. No biggie. And then starts, regular conversation as they wait for Ron to just belch up all his slugs.
Yep.
So Hagrid goes and starts making them tea, and Fang's slobbering all over Harry, and Harry's like, so what did Lockhart want? And Hagrid's like, oh, he's giving me advice on getting kelpies out of a well. And Hagrid growled a little and scrubbed the table a little hard and continued on, like I don't know, and banging on about some banshee he banished. If one word of it was true, I'll eat my kettle. So now Hagrid...
Yet another teacher, right? Yet another teacher. Hagrid is not the first teacher. Yet another teacher that Lockhart goes and gives very unsolicited advice to.
Is Hagrid a teacher yet? Doesn't he become a teacher later?
Yet another adult on the premises who he goes and gives unsolicited advice to.
And we know that Hagrid is very loyal to Hogwarts and its faculty. And so it even goes on to say it's very unlike Hagrid to criticize a Hogwarts teacher. Mm-hmm. And so Harry was quite surprised to hear this take. And Hermione, of course, is still defending Professor Lockhart. So she's like, I think you're being a bit unfair. Professor Dumbledore obviously thought he was the best man for the job. And Hagrid's like, he was the only man for the job.
Yeah. I love how Hagrid always spills the tea with the kids, with his kids.
Well, Hagrid's very authentic. He doesn't try to put on airs. He doesn't try to sugarcoat anything. He's just very Hagrid.
Yes,
and so...
he does not invite other students into his cabin all the time. Like, it's always them three. It's never...
Well, but I mean, they're friends. And he's being himself with his friends, is the point I was making behind that.
Yeah.
Even though they're now 12 years old. Still just 12-year-old kids.
There are some really messed up memes on the internet about that.
About Hagrid and 12-year-olds?
Yeah. How come, like, dear Professor Dumbledore, why do you not say anything about a grown man in the woods hosting 3 students, like, constantly without supervision or, like, whatever,
Because it's Hagrid. He's not dumb, but he's half giant, so he's not... The internet is an ugly, ugly place.
I mean, to an outsider's perspective, that happens, and it's a little bit suspect,
Yeah, but if you know Hagrid, then you totally, like, it doesn't even ruffle any feathers at all, because it's Hagrid. It's like, he thinks a dragon is a cute little pet. Come on! It's Hagrid! Anyway, so Hagrid's like, no, literally, he was the only man for the job. It's getting really difficult to find anybody to take the dark arts job because they're starting to think it's jinxed.
Yeah.
No one's lasted for longer than a year. And then he says, all right, well, he changes the subject and he nods his head over at Ron. He's like, so who was he trying to curse anyway? And so that's when Harry's like, Malfoy called Hermione something, and it must have been really bad because everyone went wild. Because Harry still has no idea what this is about. And this is where Ron is like, he's finally able to talk in between slugs, I guess, because he's like, it was bad. And he comes out from over the bucket, and he's pale and he's sweaty. And he says, Malfoy called her a mudblood, Hagrid. And then he dives back down under the table because there's more slugs coming up. And Hagrid looks outraged. And Hagrid says, he didn't, to Hermione. And Hermione's like, he did. And this is one of the very few things in the book anyway, Hermione has no idea about. She's like, I don't know what it means. I could tell it was really rude, of course. And so Ron, who's over his last batch of slugs coming up, pops back up again. And he's like, it's about the most insulting thing you can think of. He says, mudblood's a really foul name for someone who is muggle-born. You know, non-magic parents. There are some wizards, like Malfoy's family, who think they're better than everyone else because they're what people call pure blood. Then he gives a small burp and another little slug comes out before he can continue. He kind of catches it in his hand and tosses it in the bucket. Then he's like, I mean, the rest of us know it doesn't make any difference at all. Look at Neville Longbottom. He's pure blood. He's pure blood and he can hardly stand a cauldron up the right way. And then Hagrid says, well, huh?
I said, very true.
Yeah, poor Neville. He's having some trouble, and he's a pureblood. And then Hagrid points out, and they haven't invented a spell that our Hermione can't do. And he kind of says it really proudly toward Hermione, and she, turns magenta. And then Ron says, it's a disgusting thing to call someone. Dirty blood, see? Common blood. It's ridiculous. Most wizards these days are half-blood anyway. If we hadn't married muggles, we'd have died out. And then he retched and ducked back into his bucket again. And then Hagrid says, well, I don't blame you for trying to curse him, Ron, but maybe it was a good thing your wand backfired. I expect Lucius Malfoy would have come marching up to the school if you'd cursed his son. At least you're not in trouble. And Harry's like, I'm not really sure throwing up slugs is not trouble, but okay. We'll let that pass. So then Hagrid turns to Harry and he's like, I got a bone to pick with you. I've heard you've been giving out signed photos. How come I haven't got one? And Harry is pissed. Immediately he's furious. And he's like, I have not been giving out signed photos. If Lockhart is spreading that around, and then he looks over and he sees that Hagrid's laughing. Hagrid's just giving him crap. And he's like, I'm only joking. I knew you hadn't been. He said, I told Lockhart you didn't need to. You're more famous than him without trying. And Harry immediately is like, oh, bet he didn't like that too much. And Hagrid's like, no, I don't think he did. Eyes twinkling, happy that he said something that guy didn't like. And I told him I'd never read one of his books, and he decided to go.
I love how he was just like, the next thing is like, oh, nothing he just said really mattered. He's like, treacle toffee, Ron?
Yeah. He's like, yeah, Ron, you want some treacle toffee? And Ron's like, yeah, no, better not risk it. And then he's like, all right, well, come on, you guys, come see what I've been growing. And he takes them out to the pumpkin patch where he's got these huge pumpkins growing out there. And Harry's like, what have you been feeding them? And Hagrid's like, oh, I've been giving them a little bit of help. He's not really supposed to use magic, but he always does and manages to get away with it. And then Hermione's like, what, were you using an engorgement charm? And she's half disapproving, but half amused. And she said, well, you've done a good job on them. Hagrid says, well, that's what your sister said. I met her yesterday, looking at Ron and letting him know. And then Hagrid's beard's twitching because he's teasing Harry again. And he says, she said she was just looking out around the grounds, but I think she was hoping that she might run into a particular person at my house. Because if you ask me, she wouldn't say no to a sign. And Harry's like, dude, shut up, please. Just stop. Ron starts laughing, and then
Ron snorted with laughter and sprayed slugs everywhere.
And Hagrid's like, hey, watch your pumpkins, and pulls Ron away. So now it's nearly lunchtime, and Harry hasn't eaten at all, except for treacle toffee since dawn, because this whole thing happened with him getting pulled out of bed.
Right.
So they say goodbye to Hagrid and they start heading back to the school. And as they are stepping into the entrance hall, they run into Professor McGonagall, and she's like, "Oh, there you are, Potter and Weasley. You both have your detentions this evening." And Ron says, "Uh-oh, what are we doing, Professor?" And he nervously suppresses a burp because I don't think he wants Professor McGonagall to see him belching smells, because then she'll ask what happened, and then they'll have to talk about it, and he don't want that. So she says, "You will be polishing the silver in the trophy room with Mr. Filch. And no magic, Weasley. Elbow grease." Ron gulps. "And then you, Potter, will be helping Professor Lockhart answer his fan mail." And Harry's like, "Oh, God, no, not... Professor, can't I just go to the trophy room, too?" And Professor McGonagall's like, "No, certainly not. Professor Lockhart requested you specifically. 8 o'clock sharp, both of you." And so they slouch off to the Great Hall. And Hermione, as per usual, she's wearing her, "well, you did break the school rules" sort of expression on her face. And then Harry didn't really enjoy his lunch too much. And both he and Ron felt like they both got the worst out of the deal. And Ron's like, "Oh, God, I'm going to be there all night. Filch will have me there all night. There's 100 cups in that room, and I'm no good at muggle cleaning." And Harry's like, "Dude, I would swap with you in a heartbeat because I have plenty of practice from living with the Dursleys. So muggle cleaning is like nothing to me. Remember, we talked about it that last summer where he painted the garden bench and pulled the weeds and planted new flowers and all kinds of stuff while Dudley just sat on the couch. Yeah, he's... What? Shine some silver cups? Okay, yeah, no problem." But nope, he's got to go and answer Lockhart's fan mail. And all he can think of is how much of a nightmare this is going to be, because he's been trying to avoid this guy as much as possible, and now it's just going to be the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
So Saturday afternoon went by way too fast, and next thing you know, it's 5 minutes to 8, and he's dragging himself along as slowly as he can to Professor Lockhart's office, grits his teeth, and knocks. And the moment he knocks, the door flies open like Lockhart's been waiting for him, and he's beaming down at him, and he's like, "Oh, here's the little scallywag. Come in, Harry, come in." So Harry goes in, and there's a large pile of pictures on the desk that Gilderoy Lockhart is in the process of signing. He's signed a few over here, and then there's a big old pile. And he's like, "You can address the envelopes."
Mm-hmm.
And he said it like it was a huge treat. And that's when we hear about, "Oh, here, this first one's to Gladys Gledgeon. Bless her. She's a huge fan of mine." And the minutes went by really, really slowly. Like, not as fast as Saturday afternoon, which they could have enjoyed. But no. Slowly, slowly, because now here he is with Professor Lockhart. And he's...
that's always how it is, right?
Yeah, oh God. So
whenever
much
it
so.
is that you dread, time goes by like at a snail's pace. And when you really are
having a good time.
Yeah.
So the whole time, of course, because that's what he does, Professor Lockhart is just running his mouth, and Harry's like, "Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, right. Uh-huh, yeah." Like, not even listening and just kind of interjecting some sounds like he's listening. And now and then...
on
yeah,
and on about...
Oh, the man loves to hear himself talk.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's just going on, and Harry's not paying attention to any of it. Okay, yeah, right. Yeah. And every so often, Harry will get a little gem like, "Fame's a fickle friend, Harry," or "Celebrity is as celebrity does. Remember that."
That's so funny.
And Harry's moving his aching hand over the 1,000th envelope, which is Veronica Smethly's envelope. And he's like, "God, it's got to be nearly time to leave. Please let it be nearly time to leave." And then all of a sudden he hears something. And it's not the dying candles, and it's not Hogwarts. It's not Lockhart prattling on about his fans. It's a separate and distinct voice. A voice to chill the bone marrow. A voice of breathtaking, ice-cold venom. And the voice says, come to me. Let me rip you. Let me tear you. Let me kill you. And so Harry jumps, and unfortunately he leaves the large lilac splot on Veronica Smethley's.
Yes, of course, Gilderoy Lockhart was using lilac-colored ink. I loved
and having Harry fill out the envelopes in lilac-covered ink.
Of course.
And he says, what? And Lockhart's like, I know! 6 solid months at the top of the bestseller list. I broke all the records. And Harry's like, dude, no. That voice, did you not hear this voice? And Lockhart's like, sorry, what? He looks all puzzled. And he's like, what voice? And he's like, you didn't hear the voice. Harry's like, you didn't hear it. And Lockhart's just kind of looking at Harry in astonishment. And he's like, what are you talking about, Harry? Maybe we're getting a little drowsy. Great Scott, look at the time. And they realize that it's midnight. And so Lockhart's like, oh my goodness, we've been having so much fun. Oh, you might as well go ahead and get going or whatever the hell. And Harry's like, yeah. But he's straining his ears to see if he hears the voice again. Can't believe that Lockhart didn't hear the voice and doesn't know where it's coming from. So he's a little discombobulated as he leaves the room. So now it's super late. He heads back to the Gryffindor common room, and of course it's almost empty because it's after midnight. He goes straight up to the dormitory, but Ron isn't back yet. So he pulls on his pajamas and gets into bed and waits for Ron, who gets there half an hour later, nursing his right arm because he has had to use complete and utter elbow grease for the last 4 hours to polish the cups in the trophy room, and he completely smells like polish. And he's like, oh my God, my muscles have all seized up. And 14 times he made me buff the Quidditch cup before he was satisfied. And then I had another slug attack all over a special award for service to the school. Took ages to get the slime off. And he's like, so, how was it with Lockhart? And then, of course, Harry, not wanting to wake up Neville, Dean, or Seamus, and doesn't really want to be heard, tells Ron about the voice that he heard. And Ron's like, and Lockhart couldn't hear it? And Harry sees it, is like, yeah, that's weird. And Ron's like, well, do you think he was lying? But I don't get it. Even someone invisible would have had to open the door. And Harry's like, yeah, I know. I don't get it either. And that's the end of chapter 7. Our poor Harry is hearing voices.
Uh-oh.